Hey guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts. I'll go ahead and welcome everyone for showing up with me this week for another Sew With Me video. This week, as promised, we are doing applique mug rugs. So here's four of the ones that I've already started. I have another one that you and I are going to make together. But let me just go ahead and move these out of the way and I'll show you where I got these free patterns from. There's this amazing website called the Red Boot Quilt Company. So it's at the redbootquiltcompany.com. See that? Okay. So this lady makes some amazing quilts. So you can buy all kinds of patterns here. She has books and single patterns. Aren't they adorable? But what's great is she also has, if you just click on menu over here, she also has a section of free stuff. And on this page, the one we're going to be doing is the Jingle Bells mug rugs. This comes with 3 patterns where they show you the colors and the layout and how it'll end up looking. Plus there's 2 bonus patterns that she doesn't have the pictures for you, so you just kind of have to figure out the colors yourself. Aren't these adorable? I love the summer Santa and the regular Santa, and these are drawstring pouches. So she has a lot of great designs, and they're all bright and colorful and fun. So what I like to do is I like to test out a website's free patterns. Then if the patterns are well written and I enjoy them, then I go ahead and I start buying their actual patterns, because then I know that whatever money I spend on them, it's going to be money well spent, and it's not going to be, sometimes when you buy a pattern, it has mistakes in it, or it's not very well written, or it's just something that you don't understand, because not every pattern is written for everyone to understand, and I tend to look at things differently. So sometimes it's a little hard for me to understand the patterns, but hers are beautiful. I tend to print my patterns in black and white because I'm cheap and I don't want to waste the color on my printer. But apparently even with black and white there's still color in it, so I don't know, whatever. But you get the pattern placement page, and then you get, this would be a colored picture. So if you're looking online, I print this out and then I read the directions online so I can see what the colors are and stuff like that. You'll have to excuse me today. We have some cold weather coming down here in Florida, and whenever the weather changes, I kind of get a little sinus pressure area issue. So I'm kind of feeling a little blah today. So if I do anything that's confusing, just go ahead and yell at me in the comments, and I'll explain it to you better, or I'll pop up another video. So what I first did is I found the patterns I liked. I printed them all out. There was the Santa and the trees. And here's the bonus one, a bird, and I think this is supposed to be figgy pudding, but I turned it into a cupcake. Then there's a snowman, and the one we're going to be working on today is the reindeer. And this one has the little bird on there. So I go to Joann and I buy the Pellon Wonder Under Transfer Web Fusibles. I buy this by the yard, and I just go ahead and use their 40 or 50 or 60% off coupon, whatever they have, so that I always have plenty in the house. This is the Wonder Under. This is a light one, so you have to sew it down, because if you wash your item, it just comes off. They have a heavy duty one. I don't know what the number is though. If you ask at Joann's, they'll point it to you. They also have small packages with just a couple 8.5 by 11 sheets in it. With the heavy duty one, you don't need to sew through it. You can just iron it down to your fabric, and it's supposed to be permanent. It's something that's good for like wall hangings that you don't plan on washing a lot. I don't plan on using mine as mug rugs. I'm going to use mine as wall hangings anyways, but I still went ahead and used the light Wonder Under. And then I went ahead and stitch around it because sometimes wall hangings will get dusty or whatever, and I just don't, I don't know, I just don't trust the other stuff. So I just take a good old-fashioned pencil, or maybe if you want a pen or something, you can even use a Sharpie. Just whatever you do, you want to make sure it's not something that when you iron on this paper that it'll come undone. Like one of those, you don't want to use one of these Friction pens because when you iron it, it disappears with heat. Let me go ahead and show you how I trace these out and how I move the pieces around. So first of all, I have this one large piece here, number 2. I try to move it around on my paper, on my fusible, to make sure I get the most usage out of it and I don't waste a lot. So I keep it about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge on all the sides. Let me move this down. We're not doing the whole reindeer in one shot. Alright, so this dotted line, the dotted line shows that this piece, the number 2, is going to go underneath the scarf, number 4. But we're still going to trace out that dotted line because we still want fusible down there. Now, as you're tracing this, one of the things to consider is if you trace this out as is, this fusible is going to go on the back of your fabric. So you're going to end up with a mirror image of this design. Okay. Then I would put just a number 2 and an R so I would know it was for the reindeer. So like I said, when you put this down, this is going to go on the back of your fabric. The glue side to the back of your fabric. So when you go to put it on here, this piece, it really won't matter too much. But as it is, the scarf, instead of being on the left, will be on the right. What I do is I hold my picture up to the light and I just trace it out so I have a placement guide to iron my guys down. Like I said, the scarf is to the right. If you want to have it exactly like this picture and you don't want to have it reversed, there's a couple options. One, when you go to print it out, you can flip everything and have it print in the reverse. And if you don't know how to do that on your printer, or your printer won't do that, then you can just hold this up to the window and trace the back. And then trace your fusibles from this side. Also, if you just use a black Sharpie and you just trace all around these lines, the ink will go all the way through and it'll show up on the back. Now, if we were to iron this whole thing onto the back of our reindeer's head, that's a lot of fusible in the center that you really don't need to use. So we're going to do a technique called windowing. And when we cut it out, we're going to cut the inside. We're going to cut all this around the outside, but on the inside, we're also going to cut about around that line. We're going to leave about, a 1/2 inch or so. You really only need like 1/4 inch of the fusible, but I like to give a little bit extra. And then instead of wasting this center here and just putting it either in our container to save for later or throwing it out, what I'll do is somewhere in there, I'll find pieces that'll fit in there, like his nose. I can just trace around here. And then I'll cut along this line, and then I'll cut around there also, and I'll get the nose. I can also do this little circle part of his scarf with a little knot, because this one will also fit in that little window. And of course, I'd be just a little bit more careful when tracing it, but as I'm talking to you, I'm probably just not paying enough attention, so I would also put that piece. Now, if there was a little small thing, like say maybe, for mine, I'm going to use buttons for the eyes, but if you wanted to do black fabric or any other color for the eyeballs, you can also trace that around here and have those pieces inside. And then this way, you're not wasting any of this lost fusible inside here. I plan on putting buttons on Santa's eyes. Now for this one, it's not too bad. If I put the 2 buttons here, I can always put my coffee down here if I were to use it as a mug rug. But since I'm going to use it as a wall hanging, putting eyes here is not going to affect anything. But with the bird, if I were to put eyes here, anytime you go to set your coffee down, it could make it a little lopsided. So on here, you might want to use the fabric eyes if you're going to use it as a mug rug. Or you can use some embroidery stitches. Okay, so you would just continue to trace out your designs, whether from this side or the reverse, onto your fusible. And then when you cut it out, you want to cut it out about 1/8 to 1/4 inch. I usually go with 1/4 inch just to make sure I have enough room. So you just cut, you would cut just along here and leave just enough space so you know you don't want to go too far out here, because this is where we're going to trim it later. So this would be a waste of your fabric and your fusible. So if you just go about 1/4, a little over 1/8 around it, then you'll have enough fusible along this line, because this is the line that you need to have. This is going to be your main fusible line. So you need to make sure you have enough fusible here and enough fabric underneath there to do what you need. So if anyone needs any more help with how to do the fusible, just let me know where I confused you and lost you, and I'll go ahead and we'll do another video on how to work on it. There are so many different ways to do applique. You can do the fusible, the light, and where you stitch around it, or machine stitch. Well, I guess you could hand stitch. There's the kind where you needle turn underneath and you hand stitch all the way down. There's the heavy duty fusible where you don't have to sew it at all, but there's many techniques. Today we're just going to stick with a simple fusible, the lightweight Wonder Under. Now based on the pattern directions, you're going to go ahead and cut out your background square, or rectangle I should say. And I also cut a piece of batting, and I like to cut my batting a little bit larger because when I sew the applique down, I'm also going to be quilting through it to the batting. But I don't want it to go all the way through the back because I don't want my stitches to show. As you can see with Santa, I have stitched around everywhere with a black thread, but it doesn't show on the back. So it's quilted it down to the batting, but it hasn't gone all the way through. With something this small, you could do some quilting around it if you wanted to. And if you used a matching thread on the back, you could stitch all the way through. But I don't know, I like the black thread. It's kind of like cartoonish to me. And I just stitch it around that way because it works nice. Okay, so I have my backing cut out. I have all my pieces cut out with the fusible. Now you have an options here. You have 2 options. You can look at your picture and just place everything on here. And fuse things down. Or your best option is if you have a pressing mat. With this you can iron your pieces right onto here, but it won't fuse. Each piece will fuse to itself, but it won't fuse to this Teflon sheet. You can pick these up at Joann's and Michael's. Of course, those are best places because you get to use a coupon, or they might be on sale. And then after we get it all fused onto here, we can peel it off and fuse it onto here. That way we won't get any of the fusible onto our ironing board. And if we have to move things around, we can do that. So let me show you how we do it. Remember, since I did the reverse of this, as I traced over it, and when I put it on the back of my fabric, when you turn it over, it's going to be the reverse. And I traced it underneath here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this underneath here. See how right through the sheet you can see all the lines, which is why this is a placement guide. It's a little bit harder to see for you from the camera, but for me, I can see the lines through it. Plus, this is a very simple design, so it's not too hard to place. I had already printed out a second sheet so that we can look at this as a guideline, but you can also just put it on your phone or on your computer and pull up the design, the pattern, and follow it from there. So according to this, The first pieces I will be placing are my antlers. Now, some people sit here and try to peel this paper off of the back by flicking at the corners, but a lot of times you'll fray your corner. If you just take a basic sewing needle and you're just going to run it along the paper, it'll score the paper. You don't want to push so hard that you go all the way through your fabric, but it'll score the paper, and then you can just peel it off and you'll maintain nice clean edges. So I put one there because I'm following my placement guide. There's my number 2, well, my second antler from both pieces of number 1. And my number 2 is the big head. Now, since I windowed this, I don't need to use a pin. I can just peel it from the inside and it comes right off. Now remember the dotted lines that we have here that shows where the antlers are underneath the head and the head goes on top. Just place my head on top. I kind of make it so you just follow the lines a little. Make sure your ears are in the ear spot. My antlers, I probably just drew them around it too much. So you go ahead and just place it on there and you just try to line up your pieces with the lines underneath. It's your design. If you get it a little off, or if you want your antlers closer together or farther apart, it's up to you. You can do what you want. Number 3 is a scarf because it's going to be underneath the knot and it's going to be underneath the main part of the scarf, and a little bit is underneath the head. Whoops. See how that helped me from making a mistake? Just kind of lay it all on there. Then we do number 4, the main part of the scarf. That has a rounded spot going up. Just like our placement guide, it went over everything. Number 5 is our little knot. Since I did a plaid scarf in green, I chose a plain green knot because if you did a plaid one on top of it, it would just all be plaid and you would lose it. Now here it's hard to see where it is, but if you take a reference to it, you can kind of see where it goes. And number 6 is the nose. If your paper's not peeling off easily or the fusible's coming off with the paper, go ahead and stop, re-iron it, wait for it to cool, and then try again. So, right about there. I mean, it's a nose, you know, it just kind of goes in the middle. And then we just have the star. Now the star's not on this actual placement sheet because there wasn't room for it. But when we look at the little pictures over on our computer or our phone, we'll see that the star is on here. And it just kind of goes over here. You just want to make sure it's not near your edges because this is going to be your actual, because you're cutting out, I believe you cut out your background. It's about 8.5 by 11, just like a sheet of paper. So you just want to make sure your star, there's room for your star. Now, since this one is all by itself, we're not going to fuse it down to here because there's nothing sticking to it. But all these pieces, since they're layered on top of each other, like this piece has to be glued to these, now we're going to go ahead and press this. You're going to want to do it based on the directions on your fusible. I just kind of give a gentle tap all around before I actually press everything into place. And with this, you're definitely pressing. You're not ironing. You don't want to go like this. You're just kind of tacking everything down in place. Because remember, we're just using our Teflon sheet right now. We're not actually ironing it to anything. You want to let this cool for a minute. We'll go ahead and remove our placement guide. It's done its job and we don't need that anymore. See how everything's stuck together? And just gently peel it up. If something is coming separated from somewhere, then it just hasn't cooled enough for you to peel off, or you didn't press it down enough. See? Now all the pieces are layered together and we didn't iron it to our board. We'll bring over our background. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have it on your batting. That part of it doesn't really matter. Now you take your piece and decide where you want it. Now what we're going to do is you're either going to have binding around this, which is going to be about 1/4 inch, or we're going to do the flip and turn method, which is what I did. You see, Santa doesn't have any binding. I just sewed the back, flipped it around. So you just need to make sure you keep your pieces a nice little distance from the edge. Since we're doing a 1/4 inch seam, you kind of want to keep it 1/4 inch. I probably should have put his antlers down a little bit further. This guy might be just a little bit close. That's okay. We'll make them work. We'll just be very, very, very careful. If you put the antlers too far up, you could always trim them off right here and then just slide them underneath, which I think I might do with this guy. Okay, don't cringe. But let's see if we can peel him off first. Oh, yep, look. Oh, see, I didn't put him down far enough. That was the problem. Peel him off. See how far this guy was down? And the other one was just barely down like this. So, sometimes you get lucky. There, see how much better that is now? There's plenty of space up here for turning. And then you take your star. Well, he's a pretty big star, isn't he? We'll make it work, right? What do you think? You think that'll work? I don't know if I want the star to have to point straight up like that. But if I turn him sideways like this, he fits better. There's a straight up and down, but I don't know. This is the way I'm going to go with mine. So now that I have him placed where I want him, maybe. This is the part that can get you in trouble. You can spend a lot of time fiddling around with this and getting it exactly where you want it. Okay, so he's in one spot. Now we're just going to go ahead. Okay, now it's down. Now you're not going to be able to change your mind without having to make a whole new one. I even got this scarf a little bit on my star. That's okay. Then I like to flip it over and go ahead and iron it from the back also, just to make sure the fusible's fused really well. All right, place it on our batting. I cut my batting just a little bit larger, so as I'm stitching around this, if anything moves, if for some reason it ends up getting a little pulled down or whatever, I have plenty of extra room around the outside. So let's go take it over to the sewing machine. I will show you how I stitch around the applique. So if you want, you can pin your actual mug rug top to your batting if you want, but most of the time the cotton fabric just kind of sticks to the cotton batting. You can also spray baste it if you'd like. What I like to do is I like to take the black thread and we're going to stitch all around the outlines. We're going to stitch around each outline like we did here with the trees and Santa. If you wanted to, you can use matching thread. So you can use brown for his face and you can switch to green for his scarf and yellow for the star if you don't want it to be noticeable. Or you can use an invisible thread, which is kind of like a fishing line. It's a polyester thread and it's invisible. You'll see a stitch mark, but you won't actually see the thread. Me, like I said, I like the cartoon look of the black outlines on it. So I have my needle position over to the left. And I have my machine set up that when I do the back stitch to lock it, instead of it going back, it just goes up and down in one spot. Because sometimes if you go over the same line, if it's not perfect with the back stitch, you can see a double line, and I don't really care for that. You could choose to do a buttonhole stitch around the outside, or you can use one of the specialty stitches. But I'm just going to use a simple straight stitch. I think I'm going to go ahead and start right here where the knot of the scarf meets the part that's flying away. I'm going to start my stitches. I'm going to try to get my needle, where are you? I'm going to try to get my needle to come right here, right at the edge where this knot meets up. I'm going to go about 1/8 of an inch thereabouts from the edge. I'm going to bring my thread to the top so I don't get any weird knots on the back. If I were doing a design like the star where I'm going to go all the way around, I wouldn't lock my beginning stitches, but since this line will not be crossed again, I'll go ahead and lock my stitches here so they don't come undone later. And then I'm just going to go ahead and follow the outline of the scarf. As I said, I like the cartoon look of it, so if all of my line is not exactly 1/8 of an inch even all the way around, I'm okay with that as long as I stay on my applique piece. And let's be perfectly honest, we know how I am about mistakes. If I go off of the piece, I'll just go off of all of the pieces so it looks like I did it on purpose. It's a design element, right? So if you're new to sewing like this on an applique and everything, you might want to go a little bit slower. But if you're going on, for me, I'm going on a straight line. I'm just going to kind of go as fast as I want. I kind of bring it close to the point, but not going off the fabric. And then I pivot to do the side. Now on something with a simple little curve, a gentle curve like on this scarf, what I do is I manipulate the fabric to go around that curve. But when I'm going around a curve like this, an actual circle that's nice and tight, I constantly stop and pivot my foot and my needle as I'm going. I'll show you when I do that one. But for this one, I just kind of manipulate it a little. Go a little bit slower. So this one I'm kind of pulling over here with my right hand, and I'm kind of taking this hand and moving it this way so I can follow this curve. I find little snips like these are very helpful because you can get really close to the fabric to snip off the ends. But if all you have is scissors, those work fine too. Pivot to go down this side. Turn in my piece as I go. Now Now when I get to here, I've already manipulated my fabric a lot, so I kind of need to pick up my foot and just adjust it a little. When I get back to the knot, I will go ahead and backstitch in this spot to lock the stitch. If your machine automatically does a locking stitch and cuts it, you're wonderful, but my little cutter broke a while ago. I think I used it too much. Then I go ahead and just trim my threads. And there you go. Now let me show you how to do the nose. This nose isn't too bad, but if we do a smaller piece like the eye, you might want to go ahead and adjust your stitch length to a smaller stitch length so you're able to go around that corner a lot easier to follow that curve. Now since this one is a complete circle, I don't have to go ahead and lock my stitch in the beginning. I stitch for a little bit until I get about 1/8 of an inch away with my needle down. I lift my presser foot and I pivot my fabric. I stitch as much as I can, a little bit more, needle down, presser foot up, pivot my fabric. And that's all there is to doing these little stitches here. Now my circle is not a beautiful circle. You can see little spots and stuff like that. But remember, I'm going for the more of a cartoony look, so I don't need to have it to be actually perfect. As you see here on my snowflake, I tried to do the rounded around it to go, but then it just got to be too hard to get that curve. I kept getting it squared off, so I just said forget it, and I squared off all of them. See, doesn't need to be perfect. And when I get back to my beginning, then I'll just go ahead and reverse it and lock the stitches. It's a lot easier if your presser foot is one of the clear plastic ones, so then you can easily see where you started and where you stopped. Mine has clear in the front, but it's a metal foot. It's hard for me to see, but I just kind of guess. As you can see, this time I didn't guess quite right. If I want to, I can pick those stitches out, but it's really not that big of a deal because if we weren't zoomed in this close, it might not even be noticeable. Not too bad. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll just go ahead and keep outlining all of these, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. Okay, so we got our little reindeer all stitched down. I went all the way around all the edges. And if you're not sure if you got all the pieces sewn down, if you flip it over, you'll see the outline. So in case you missed anything, you'll notice right away that one of the pieces isn't sewn down. Like say you were stitching around here but stopped for some reason, you would see all white here and no thread, so you know, hey, I need to go back and finish stitching around there. Now our next step is to go ahead and trim off this extra batting, and then we'll do the backing. Now when I trim pieces like this, as you can see, this piece of this cutting mat has a lot of the batting on it. Because when we trim this, we're going to be laying this right side up and trimming around the edges. So the part that's touching the cutting board is the batting, and your rotary blade pushes down and actually makes a slice into your board, and then the batting gets stuck into it. So I just took an old board that was already getting dull and I needed to have a new use for it. I needed to get a new board. So instead of just throwing this away, I decided to save it for this purpose. Now batting and a bad mat can dull your blade. So what I do is I have that extra one that I've marked paper. This used to be a sharp blade in my regular cutter that I cut my fabric with. And then once it became dull, I moved it over to my paper one. Because cutting on paper and batting is going to dull it really quick anyway, so you don't want to use a brand new one. Now here you can make some adjustments. If you put this guy down on crooked, you can go ahead and kind of cut the bottom to be crooked with it, and then you go around all the edges and square it up. But I've got him down pretty good. He's not perfectly even, but he's good enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my black line right across the bottom here. See how I have my mark right along here? I just put it right along the edge with a little bit of this blue fabric on the outside, and then I'm just going to trim that. And this will become my straight line that I can cut all the rest of them off of. Okay, so then I just turn my mat. And now I line my black line up evenly all across the bottom here. And then I'll be able to cut up the side. I can just slide it down to where I want it, just to cut off a little bit of the edge. Make sure that I have blue fabric sticking out a little bit past my ruler all the way around. And just keep doing the same thing all around. You just want to make sure that you're lining it up even on the line, and that you don't have you don't want to have just a whole bunch of batting. You want to make sure you have a little bit of the blue background fabric sticking out, so you know you're trimming it evenly. See, now since I used the old mat, my new one, not my new one, my good mat doesn't have any of the batting stuck into it. I mean, I'm starting to get some dings out of it, but this mat's really good because it's reversible and it's really nice on the other side. The next thing we need to do is get our backing fabric. I chose these snowman. So you want to make sure you don't have to cut your backing this much larger, but I cut with all my other pieces, I waited until I got to this point and I trimmed it up. Then I laid it on a piece of fabric and I just cut about a 1/2 inch all the way around. But I wanted to have this piece cut out ahead of time for us so we didn't have to worry about cutting things out. And I just guesstimated it and made it bigger, so it was fine. So you just kind of center it on your fabric. You want to have the right sides facing. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch all the way around and we're going to leave a spot for turning. Now you can leave that spot anywhere that you would like. It's best not to leave it too close to an applique just because it's just, I don't know, it's just easier. I'll probably leave it on this side just because there's nothing here, so when I'm turning the fabric under, I'm not running into anything. So let's go back to the machine and we'll stitch around this. So once again, I'm being a rebel and I don't have any pins in mine, but I have plenty of space all around and it's a small piece, so I feel comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and start on this side and have this be my turning spot. We're going to be stitching about 1/4 inch all the way around, and we're going to leave anywhere from 2 to 3 inches open on the side. Depends on how big your piece is. If it's a bigger piece like a baby quilt, you want to leave a little bit more space for turning it. Generally, it's just enough to get your fingers or your hand in there to turn it. So I'm going to leave a space. Maybe about from here to somewhere around here. Now, after we spin this around and turn it, we're going to have to tuck these edges in and stitch back around the outside. I'll explain that. You'll understand it when we get to that point. But for now, one of the tricks I'm going to teach you is instead of starting here and just stitching around, we're going to start out here and stitch in 1/4 inch and then go. So I'm going to place my needle down right on the edge of my batting and my backing fabric. And then I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch in towards the piece. And then I will turn my piece around and I will stitch all the way around and leave that opening for turning. You want to go about whatever the distance is from the edge. I did about 1/4 of an inch. You want to stop about that far from the corner. You're going to lift your presser foot with the needle down. If you didn't go far enough like I didn't, just take another stitch. And then I'm going to lift my presser foot with my needle down. I'm going to turn it around and rotate it so I can come down this lane. Make sure everything's lined up nice and neat, and here we go. And you're just going to keep doing that all the way around till you get back to the next side where you started. If you'd pinned around the edges or used the little clips or something, you wouldn't have to worry about making sure everything's smooth. Now let's say right here our stars were too close to the edge, and as I'm stitching I would have stitched over the applique. I can just make this line over here, instead of 1/4 inch, I can make my sewing line 1/8 of an inch. So I made sure, so I can make sure none of my appliques get sewn over, because when you turn it around the other way, you would lose the design. But I have plenty of room, so I don't have to worry about it. Now you can either leave a mark like I did, and I use my friction pen, so when I iron it, this mark will disappear, or you can just put 2 pins right there instead of the 1 pin, so you know to stop in that spot. Now when I get to this spot, I'm going to pivot it and I'm going to sew off of the batting so it matches the other side of the opening where I stitched onto the batting. It's only like 3 or 4 stitches, but that's going to allow that to be easily to be turned. Alright, back over to the ironing. Okay, now we need to trim off the excess backing. I just line it right up alongside of the batting, and then I trim it. You already squared up the backing when you squared up the front of it before you stitch the back to it, so you just need to trim it off along the batting. If you trim off a little of the batting, it's not a crisis. Now, these pieces you can save if you want to do a crumb quilt. Or a ticker tape quilt. These pieces are definitely big enough. I believe this one, yep, this one would go into our 1.5 inch bin. And this one can go into our 2 inch bin. So I wouldn't throw those away. But something like this, I wouldn't even save it for a ticker tape quilt. Now you can stick a pair of hemostats inside here and pull it out if you need to. But I can usually just put my fingers in between the front and the back. Reach all the way through and grab a piece and just gently pull it through. Well, I'm not super gentle because I stitched off the fabric, so I know those stitches won't get pulled. And then I take my rounded crochet hook, my plastic one, and I just pop out my corners. Now we could have trimmed. Half the time I forget to go ahead. You can trim this little bit off the corners so you have less bulk when you flip it. But if you forget like I do all the time, it's once again, it's not a crisis. You just have a little extra to deal with in the corner. So this one, I cut the corner off, and we can see what that looks like. And this one, I didn't, and it's fine. So then I just run my plastic hook, because it's a plastic hook, I know I'm not going to push through the seam. I just run it along all my edges to make sure they're out. Now because we stitched off the fabric and stuff, we can just pop these in with our fingers and it's going to want to go and be stitched right like that. So now let's iron all the way around it. With a project like this, we're doing a lot of back and forth. We're at the ironing, we're cutting, we're tracing, we're back to the sewing machine, we're back to the ironing. It's kind of nice when you can do more than one at a time. A little assembly line sewing. Yeah, just kind of like roll it just a little bit to make sure that we only see the front and the backing is on the back. Now if the backing peeks out, once again, I'm not really going to cry about it. It'll be okay. Give a nice iron, maybe a little steam. And all four sides. It's the same thing with my corners. While it's nice to have exact pointy corners, you're not always going to get them. Now on this side, I just tuck my edges in, my backing. The front's going to be a little bit fuller because you've got batting in there too. Just kind of line up my edges. See if I can get it nice and straight and give it a good press. A little extra steam on that spot. Okay, back to the machine, and we're going to stitch all the way around it, and at the same time we are going to seal up this hole and make sure everything stays nice and flat. Now once again, you can choose to use blue thread on the front and then a matching tan on the back. You can use white, you can use the black, you can use the gray, or you can use the visible thread. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the black, just like we outlined it everywhere else. I like to start my stitching just a little bit past or before this turning hole, so I make sure I get that part first. Then the rest of it's smooth sailing, and I know I've already done the hard stuff. Once again, you can pin this hole closed if you'd like. But I'm just going to go ahead and stitch around it. This time I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. This is just as top stitching, and you want to make sure that you catch and close up this hole. Here we go. That was the hardest part. The rest of it we just follow all the way around, top stitching it. Once again, we're pivoting in the corners. We're going to just miss the point of our star, so we're okay there. I'm going to want to make sure I go back over this starting spot so it'll secure the beginning, and then I will backstitch to finish it off. 3 or 4 stitches past. Lock my thread, and I'm done. And that's it. You've made your first mug rug. Now, if you didn't want to make mug rugs with these, you can do it like I do, and you can just hang it on the wall. You can put some of the command poster strips on the back of this. If you wanted to, you can put some pins in it, or some push pins, or even your sewing pins that will go in here and make a very small hole in your wall. Or you can put little, if you put little, they have little plastic rings you can put on the back and just hand stitch it on and hang it from that. I like to use these command poster hanging ones. You get 16 in a package, and it's like $2-3. You just put them in the corners. Now for this one, these are so small you can get away with just putting one in each top corner. But if you had a larger wall hanging, you'd put 4 of them on. I still have to go ahead and find some buttons to stitch down on the eyes. And my snowman's earmuff still needs the headpiece that goes up and across like this. I was thinking about going through my stash to find some of the mini rickrack. That might look nice there. And if I don't find that, then I could put some decorative, I could put a chenille stem up there. I can use some embroidery stitches. And then he needs eyes. The birdie needs eyes. And the cupcake's fine like it is. And the fabric I used has, I don't know what these little are, these little squigglies. They look like pins or something. but it makes it look like sprinkles. So after I get all the eyes sewn on, I'll come back and I'll put another video on and show you what these guys look like. And as you can see on this guy, he was supposed to have a red hat, and this was supposed to be the white fur here with the white pom-pom, but I wasn't paying attention when I ironed the fusible to the fabric, and I wasn't going to waste it, and I just went ahead and did it this way. So I might just take some fun embroidery stitches and make little straight lines to make it look like a Poofy Pom-Pom, or just leave it like it is, because the black outline allows you to see that that's a pom-pom and not the top of his hat. Another fun idea is with these is if you don't turn them into mug rugs, you can make each of them like a block and then stitch them all together in a quilt, or a wall hanging. Put some sashing or just stitch it together like this. I think it would make a really cute quilt. Santa and the trees are my favorite. Although I do like Frosty and the reindeer. So comment down below and let me know which one's your favorite. I hope this helped out anyone who was thinking about doing some mug rugs but wasn't quite sure how to do it.
Mug rugs are a fun way to test out new techniques and new patterns.
So like I said, after I get all the eyeballs put on and all the buttons sewn on, I'll go ahead and put up a separate video to show you what these look like. And then next Friday, our Sew With Me is going to be the EPP, English Paper Piece Hexagons. And we'll start a new series with that because there's a lot of information with those, and I don't think we'll do justice to it by just trying to cram it all into one video. So we'll probably do more than one video. So remember, if you like what you saw in this video, please go ahead and like and subscribe and share it so other people can see it also. And once I hit 5,000 subscribers, we're going to go ahead and do the mystery giveaway. You never know, you might find one of these mug rugs inside the mystery giveaway box. Alright, until next week, bye!